This is the Conscious Economics Podcast, and I'm your host, Rhiannon Roseland. This is the place where we explore people, planet, profit, and art through the lens of the new economy. If you're interested in changing yourself, getting more creative, or changing the system at large, then this is the podcast for you. Tune in every other week as we explore these topics with amazing guests. We'll go deep, we'll go heart-centered and soul-felt as we go into how we change ourselves and change the world. What's up, everybody? Oh my goodness, it's been such a long time because we've had this little break, and I'm here with this really special bonus episode of the Conscious Economics Podcast. So for all of you that have missed us as we've been on break since season 3, this is a special little gem that we are so excited to present. This episode was actually recorded live at Canadian Music Week, and it was done in partnership with our amazing friends at Unison Fund. I know all of you who've been listening to the podcast for season 3 remember the brilliant Anna Ruddick from Unison Fund and the amazing conversation that we had. So Anna actually approached us and said, hey, would you like to partner to create this panel discussion and live Conscious Economics podcast episode at Canadian Music Week? And during that week, I was actually away, and it's a story for another time. I went to a 10-day silent meditation retreat early in June, and that was a whole other experience. But our beautiful creative director and co-founder of our music side, Lunar Studios, Jacqui Playfair, ended up co-moderating this incredible conversation. So what you're about to hear is that live conversation that happened. So of course, Jacqui, which I don't know if you all have been exposed to Jacqui. She's one of the wizards behind the scenes and such a huge part of the creative brand of Conscious Economics. And of course, such a huge vision holder for all the work that we do with artists and music workers, which is why it was so fitting for her and Anna to co-host this. And there were some other familiar folks that were on this panel discussion that are part of the Conscious Economics family. Dominique Grant, who I all know you all loved her episode that was on the podcast this season. So Dom actually came on as one of the artist representatives during this conversation. Aseel El-Baba, of course, our in-house financial therapist, joined us. I know you know Aseel well. She was there to share all of her wisdom. And then one of the artist representatives, the other artist representative, was Lucas Silveira. And I have not yet met Lucas, but in listening to this conversation and hearing back from Jacqui and everyone who got to be in his presence, Lucas, I need to meet you. You're the coolest. And thank you for sharing so much incredible wisdom during this conversation. So with that said, I'm going to shoot you over into that live conversation. The topic was really around achieving and sustaining financial wellness for Canadian independent music workers. Artists are such a big part of the Conscious Economics vision and such a big part of our community. So this was a real treat. And I think you're going to glean a lot from it, whether you are a Canadian independent music worker or whether you're an entrepreneur, a creative, or someone that's working in the corporate side of things. There was just so much honesty, so much wisdom that was dropped in this conversation. So enjoy and let us know what you think. Rate and review and send and share to all your friends.
Thank you all for coming. We're so excited to have this important conversation about our financial wellness as music workers. It's a big conversation. I will introduce myself. I'm Anna Ruddick. I work with the Unison Fund as their industry relations manager. I've been with Unison since 2020 when the pandemic, or COVID, the C word as we sometimes call it, derailed my very stable and lucrative career as a session and touring bass player. But you know, there's a plot twist. It turns out that musicians' advocacy might be my passion and my life's work. I love this work, and I'm so glad that I get to work and grow with the amazing organization, the Unison Fund. And thank you all who are here from the Unison Fund. A bit about us. Unison was created to help musicians with the financial and emotional struggles that come with this territory. We offer 100% free mental health counseling as well as legal advice, assistance with family issues, etc. through our partner, TELUS Health. And we also have 2 new financial aid support programs that are now live. The first one is the Legacy Fund, which is something I'm so excited about. This is a fund which supports senior members of the music community to live with dignity by giving them additional financial support. Folks are often still gigging into their 70s, into their 80s and beyond, and receiving negligible pension payments after long careers of being self-employed musicians. These folks have laid the foundation for Canadian music, and they deserve way more security than they have. So this fund is also for anyone with long-term health issues. Our other program, the Emergency Financial Support Program, is to assist music workers facing unforeseen crisis who have made the majority of their income from music for at least 5 years. So those are the two programs that we offer right now. And on that note, the reason why we're here. Money plays into and directly affects every aspect of our lives, including both our emotional and physical selves. As I said before, working with Unison, I was a full-time musician, so terms like financial avoidance, scarcity, and generally accepting less security than anyone with a normal job is just, that was life. So when I met Jacqui from Conscious Economics, we spoke at so much length. Our organizations are so aligned, and you'll learn from her in a second what Conscious Economics is. I started to be able to think about these things a lot more. The fact that part of advocacy now for me is starting to have these kind of foundational conversations around big things that we as a community need to fix. Musicians and artists deserve better for what we contribute to the world, our communities, the economy. And so let's talk about how we can demand better for ourselves. I met Jacqui on a panel about mental health for music workers, my favorite subject. I don't have mental health, but we love that conversation. And we talked for hours and hours about our similar organizational goals. It was such a funny ADHD conversation that lasted for 3 hours, and we've just aligned ever since. And I'm so excited to introduce you to Jacqui Playfair from Conscious Economics. Please tell us about you.
Also, hi, everyone. I'm Jacqui. I work with Conscious Economics. I am their creative director. And a little bit about our organization, which I always find really funny to put into an elevator pitch because it's like so impossible. But essentially what we do is we are really mindful of integrating creativity and wellness in business. And how we go about doing that is we host a variety of different events and activations, educational programming, things like that. And the focus of these activations are to really convene and bridge and broker various communities that don't always have so much access to each other. On the one hand, that's kind of like the business, the C-suite, the policymakers, those types of leaders. And then on the other side, we have artists, creatives, young people, entrepreneurs, community members that, again, we kind of need to see these groups come together to start having these new economy dialogues and kind of push a deeper sort of economic agenda that sort of makes sense for everybody else. So what we're doing today is kind of talking about a subject matter that's really close to conscious economics, which is financial wellness and financial therapy. This topic underlies so much of how we really just run our own businesses, both as artists and creatives, and then also just business leaders in general. Basically, what I wanted to sort of preface all of this with is that this conversation has so many layers, and it goes so much deeper than your traditional financial literacy conversation. And how we're approaching that is through this lens of financial therapy and wellness. And it's really important to us that this is viewed holistically, mind, body, spirit. Our emotions live in our body. They regulate our nervous system. They're associated with our relationship to money. So we're just here to really unpack all of that because there's so much to it. And we're joined by literally like the best people ever. I'm so excited. And I know, Anna, you're going to introduce them. So
I will do that. These are my friends. They're also three of the most impressive people that I know in the entire world. So we're very lucky to have all of you here. I'm going to run down these bios just because I would like you to know as much about them as possible before we start getting into this conversation. Aseel is an award-winning financial planner, the first financial therapist in Toronto, trauma of money method practitioner, and psychotherapist in training. She's on a mission to fill the gaps in our financial services industry by helping her clients with their emotions, thoughts, and beliefs around money. So important. Her practice offers an opportunity for economic healing and financial empowerment. And Lucas is best known as the frontman for the Canadian rock band The Clicks. He was the first transgender man in history to be signed to a major record label deal with Warner Music Tommy Boy Silver label. He's toured worldwide with acts such as Cyndi Lauper, the B-52s, Debbie Harry, Tegan and Sara, The Cult, and the New York Dolls, to name a few. I cannot. That's so impressive. And in 2021, Lucas ventured into the world of television as the co-host for the Vice docuseries Shine True. And this is Dom. last but not least, she is an award-winning singer-songwriter and entrepreneur from Toronto. Dom recently was added to the Women in Music Canada Honor Roll presented by Spotify. Her single Airbrush was shortlisted by the Rogers Emerging Artist Program and YouTube Hits, attaining placement in the top 40 AC Canadian radio. She was featured in the Times Daily as one of the top African-Canadian women to watch. Her collaboration with Grammy Award-nominated producer Jarrell the Young has led to sync placements with brands like L'Oreal Paris. She's featured in an RBCX music commercial spot, which opened the 68th Grammy Awards. Beyond the music, Dom is a sought-after speaker and the founder of the award-winning agency Grant Creativity, Inc., which founded the Imagine Summit, presented by RBC in collaboration with the TIFF Lightbox Cinema. The Imagine Summit is Canada's first visualization and professional development summit. So we've got some amazing people to speak to about this amazing subject today. And so, I mean, as you know, if you're here to learn how to make a budget, that's not this kind of financial conversation. We're going to talk about another layer that influences everything we do, and that's money just through the lens of being human.
On that note, it's just interesting, and I've learned so much about this through just knowing Aseel and having these conversations. But when we're making financial decisions like investing in a house or negotiating a record deal, which I've never done, but it seems pretty cool, and even just sharing finances with a partner, all of these different things that I think all of us can relate to in some capacity, what I think we sometimes forget is there's such an emotional layer to making those decisions. And I think because we're so maybe familiar with fear or familiar with our stomach feeling super anxious and all of these things, we just normalize it when really we can get out of that and we can repattern how we respond to some of these decision-making situations. And so I think what we're here today to do is just kind of, it's like a preface to the budgeting and to all of these things that we've learned that are more, I guess, tangible and objective. It's kind of how do we identify that deeper layer which guides our decisions in this space. And I think it's really important to do that. So just to kind of get deeper into the conversation, we're going to start with Aseel. And you have such a cool story and it's such a powerful story. And I think that your experiences, from what I've come to learn about you, especially being raised in a war-torn country and moving over to Toronto, where you started a profession in financial advisory and having this really corporate, big, fat, scary job, and then leaving that traditional space and having the courage to innovate and to trust and to navigate. I think that that's brought you to where you are here. And I'd love for you to speak a little bit about that and how you've learned to integrate so many of those modalities into this new space that is really quite new. Financial therapy is fresh.
Yes, it is. It's fresh in Canada. It started in 2008 after the market crash in the US. But my mission is to bring this to Canada in much bigger shape than it has been. But to tell you a bit about my story, it is actually relevant to reflect on my childhood being in a war-torn country, because that's where my hatred to money started. I associated money with the reason I'm not safe every day, because that's why people created wars in the region I grew up around, or at least that was the narrative around it. And my dad was a communist, so I grew up with this idealistic version of hard work and being a person with a big heart and a person who cares about others means that I reject wealth, I reject money, and I reject the pursuit of that. So coming to Canada, I came with a single mother, found myself starting in a new country with absolutely no one and nothing. So we had to rely on the Canadian welfare system and the housing market to just get us started on our feet. And I had really good marks in school. And before I knew it, I became a financial advisor. And that was like such a shock for my system. I recall just the first few weeks and holding that business card felt like an imposter syndrome. I couldn't fathom how I can just go and, you know, still be reliant on some government support and be like during the day advising people on their finances. It felt very hard for me to do that. But I made a commitment that if I really want to be of value to others, I need to start really looking into this area in my own life so I can walk the walk and talk the talk. I made a commitment that I'm going to buy my first house in Toronto before I turn 30. And I achieved it at the age of 28. And that's because I started reading books about like the energy of money, the soul of money, the art of money, like not necessarily just budgeting and saving and these tools, which are absolutely important, but I needed to like really dig deeper into what am I feeling, thinking, and believing about money that is really impacting my reality. And like Jacqui mentioned, my clients kept calling me their therapist, and I realized I was using tissue box more than any other chart in my office. My last job I was managing a portfolio of $100 million on Bay Street. So I was dealing with really high net worth executives. But before that, I was in local branches, and I realized there's a lot of perils, regardless where we are on the spectrum of our financial journey. We all have emotions and beliefs that we have yet to identify and make sense of. So I quit my job, went back to school, pivoted into mental health to become a psychotherapist, and started my financial therapy practice in, ironically, March 2020. So yes.
It's so powerful, and I think even just such a testament to you with launching a business, especially in such a newer and more uncertain space. You're crushing it, and I just love you. You brought up so many limiting beliefs that you had yourself, and that I think are so relatable for so many people industry-wide. And when it comes to artists and artist wellness, I'm curious if you can speak a little bit about that struggling artist mentality. And it's kind of interesting because from my perspective, I'm not an artist, but I've heard through friends, it's almost a romanticized kind of idea because you want to be a little outside of the system, or, we're rejecting sellout culture and all of these types of things, when really it's the system itself and the pay structure that is broken, and that needs to be acknowledged, and we need to figure that out. And so I guess my question is, when you are working and mentoring artists and creatives in this space, how do you support them in reframing that narrative and creating a new collective narrative that's empowering and not just, oh, I guess I'll just count myself out of this space?
Absolutely, great question. And the reason financial therapy is unique, because there are certain things that are systemic that can impact the majority of us, and there are certain things that are very individual, that are unique based on the family system you grew up in, the upbringing you had, the circumstances you've been through. So it's really the combination of both that impacts where somebody's at. And when I deal and work with people one-on-one, it's really figuring out where they are in that spectrum. Now, some of the really common things I see amongst artists is constantly the conflict between passion and profit, feeling as if they'd be selling their soul, or that their art wouldn't be passionate enough if they are now going to use it to profit from, as if profit dilutes, or not even just dilutes, but makes their art murky and not something they want to associate with. So there's on some level a rejection for profiting out of something you're passionate towards, and that's a very common one. But there's obviously other ones as well that are some more unique to certain individuals, but the passion versus profit one is a very common one across a lot of people in the industry. And part of what I do is, I'm not sure if you've heard of the concept of cognitive dissonance, which is when your belief systems and your behaviors are not on the same page. And sometimes you set certain goals for yourself, like I want to achieve these things, or I want to create this lifestyle, or whatever it may be. If your belief system is not congruent with what it is you're setting yourself up to do, you're technically in one of the hardest experiences people go through, because your body cannot handle that dissonance itself. So part of the work is to actually start repatterning these beliefs, because you still want to achieve these goals. Sometimes people give up on these goals because of how uncomfortable this journey can be, but really it's possible to rewire how we think about certain things and how to change our belief systems around it. So part of this work is getting to the roots of your beliefs.
It's really great to know that cognitive dissonance doesn't have to be like the average lifestyle choice for a music worker anymore, if we really focus on the right things. And also, I would like you to be my therapist. I want to throw to the musicians here for the next question, because we're starting to understand now, like through Aseel, what financial therapy looks like in practice. It makes so much sense. It's so funny that this is something that like is not practiced by so many people, because it's like one of the most logical things I've ever heard about, and I heard about it like, in the past couple of months. It's incredible. Dom and Lucas, do you guys feel comfortable sharing like a particular example of a limiting or subconscious belief around money that has affected you, sort of that ties into this narrative?
Yeah, I can totally jump in. So when I was 6 years old, I was told that I had a learning disability, and I was taken out of regular classes and put into special ones. And that day, there were two narratives that I learned. The first one was that anything that I did wouldn't feel or resonate as being good enough or valid. And the other belief that I also developed was that I had a mother that would fight for me and just saw so much more. And so I start here because I think that when we talk about limiting beliefs, we start with the things right now that are impacting us. But that narrative that you developed as a 6-year-old kid, that story that people consistently told you, that thing that made you stand out, is actually the thing that's operating in your subconscious and is dictating your limiting beliefs. And so I realized later on that I'd walk into rooms and I would not feel worthy of being in them. I would be consistently afraid that someone was going to find me out. When big opportunities would come in, I would second guess whether or not they were valid. And when it came to money, I had this reoccurring belief that I needed to stay in a system of poverty because I grew up in a low-income neighborhood. And so that idea was that it's scarcity. It's that things like paying staff felt like the end of the world because people don't talk to you about the fact that when you are an artist and you start making money that's beyond what you ever thought you could make, that the idea of it going away can trigger trauma from when you're a kid and it not coming back. And so I would say, and just kind of connecting this to the money conversation and being so honest, my limiting belief was this fear that money coming in was never going to come back. And in learning that and in recognizing it, I had to take that back to the limiting belief of not being enough and realizing that these are all tied to lack and lack mindset. But underneath all of that, my big lesson was subconscious beliefs, and that we really think that we are making conscious decisions every day, and that it's just the fact that we're just being lazy or we're not as active as we want to be in making decisions. But really, if you have a subconscious belief, our subconscious belief systems dictate more than 70% of our behavior on a day-to-day basis. So the fact that you've chosen to watch Netflix instead of getting a project completed or instead of doing something that you need to do is not necessarily because you're just lazy. It's actually because there's another system internally that's working on your behalf. And so I think what's so important when talking about belief systems is that we look at it with compassion and we understand that we're not the reason entirely that we're not where we want to be. We're not the reason entirely that we don't have the mindset that we want. We're wired through childhood. And a part of that compassion with limiting beliefs is taking it back a second, saying, okay, cool. This is the narrative that I was given. It probably and isn't mine. I don't accept it, but I do understand that the repercussions of that being a part of my childhood has been that it is wired into my DNA. It's wired into my thinking. And when I have a week where I maybe am terrified of spending a lot of money on something, I'm going to say, 1, I'm going to have compassion for the fact that this was taught. And 2, I'm going to try to rewire it by taking an action that maybe goes outside of what my brain thinks is okay. And I'm going to lean on my new version and the new version of myself in order to do that.
Wow. A lot of that resonates. That was brilliant. I think for me, there's a lot of pieces there that resonate for me. I think I came from a working class Portuguese family, 2 parents who arrived here in the early 60s and had this integrated idea of, we are so lucky to be here, so we will take whatever comes. And just put your head down and follow the rules and don't make waves, because if you make waves, and they came from, poverty, where, like my dad used to always say, the first pair of shoes he owned was when he was 17 years old coming to Canada. So they had this scarcity means you grab on, you hold on, and you do whatever you need to do. So a lot of that, I was not given a message that you have value, that you can negotiate. And so when I got older and I became part of the music industry, first as a lesbian identified female, there was that idea that I was so lucky to get a gig, period. So I can't be asking for more than, like a couple of beers and that sort of mentality. And then I came out as trans, and when I got my first label deal, I was 32 years old. It was 2006. And all I remember thinking was, I am so lucky to be here. Don't make waves, just take what you're given. And that entire conversation was all about how I viewed myself, which was, I have no value. And I think that a lot of folks who come from marginalized communities specifically hold these ideas that we are so lucky to even be here, that we forget that we have talent, we have experience, we have knowledge, we have wisdom, and that is worth something. And so it's only been actually very, very recently that I've realized that when I'm actually trying to negotiate a fee, like for a speaking gig or for a show, I can feel myself getting full of dread. And I'm like, why am I doing this? And I'm like, oh, because you're still learning that you have value and that it's okay to ask for it. And guess what? The worst thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to say, yeah, I'm not paying you that. And then you go, well, then I'm not doing the gig. Right? And that's all you can do. And then you look for another one. But there's this idea, like you said, like you think that this is all you're going to get. And so you have this energy towards money, which is you hold on to it so close, and then you forget that it's cyclical. You know, I believe in this sort of like Buddhist awareness thing where if you don't hang on to something, you don't attach, that the energy of it will actually like come to you. And I find the less I think about money, and I don't mean that in like being careless or whatever, but the less I sort of like try to control that energy, the more valued I feel in myself and the more I'm able to actually like make a living where I can survive.
Something I forgot to mention earlier, and both of you reminded me of this really very powerful point, is this concept of waiting to be discovered. And that actually, when you think about, when you have certain goals or visions for yourself, when you think about the pathway or how you envision you're going to get to these pieces, there's something called a locus of control. And there's a spectrum to how, when we think about our life, how much we feel we're in control of our life versus fate and predetermined things that happen. And we all fall on a spectrum to what that is. And sometimes when we have a very external focused locus of control, we approach life in a disempowered way because we feel that whatever success or milestones we want to achieve are outside of us, are things that are outside our control. And a lot of artists struggle with that because of these concepts.
Absolutely, and that's why these foundational conversations are so important, because across everybody in the industry, there is that imposter syndrome and that not knowing your worth, and we contribute so much, and music is like the world's favorite pastime, but yet why are we suffering so much as artists and musicians just to come up, just to grow up in this industry, which is a job, right?
I'm trying to survey everything that all three of you have said right now, and I'm rejigging my thoughts a little bit because there's just so much there. But I think what I'm hearing and taking away is just the true depth to how much goes into the decisions that we're making right now and the people that we think that we are right now. And I really appreciate you, Dom, saying to have compassion for these learned things, and they're ideas that are more put upon us that we need to navigate and, reconfigure and just figure them out for ourselves. But it really brings me back to kind of what we were chatting about at the beginning, where this is such a holistic conversation. You can't just talk about money without talking about that fear of dread in your belly that you're discussing, Lucas. And I got like a prompt from TD on my phone. I'm like, I'm going to turn that over and slide it to the other side of my table. Like, I'm not acknowledging this right now. Where's that coming from? And just kind of understanding that like our family dynamics, the people that we surround ourselves by, this all is part of the composition that lives with us about how we navigate the world on our own. And it's almost, you have to see something to believe that it's true. So I think it's really beyond doing the work, which looks different for everybody. I'll just obviously speak for myself, but part of what I deem to be my work is putting myself in spaces and in communities that are expansive. If I haven't seen what I feel like I would like to become or learn, then I'm going to try to find people that are doing that, because that's an expansive opportunity. And I think it's so important to remember that, yes, family is so important, and I think we all, for the most part, value what they have to say, but they're one voice also among so many, and at some point we have to kind of explore that on our own. Back to you, Dom, too. I think it's been really cool getting to know you because I've seen your shows, you've come out and worked with us at different events, you've mentored so many artists, you occupy so many different spaces, and you seem to be a very big tent person whereby you work with so many different types of folks and you maintain your own authenticity and integrity when you move through all these groups. So I think what's really cool and special about that is your business sensibility is just mind-blowing. Like, you don't just land deals, you've earned them and you've negotiated them, and you've really found that space between being an artist and a business owner, and you like really walk that walk so strongly. I learned so much from you, just even like emailing with you and seeing how you kind of operate. It's so nuanced and then it's so big. How did you get that courage to sort of do that? And also in these negotiating experiences, what helps you feel like you can show up authentically? And I just would love for you to speak about those things.
Thank you so much. That actually means so much
It's
to me.
so true. I didn't even make it up.
And I don't want to start fangirling, so I'm not going to like reciprocate this back right now, but we'll do it. We'll do it after. So at the core of it, I had to get really comfortable in understanding the power of being underestimated. I wasn't the person that anyone expected anything from. Coming into this world, complications, going through high school, going through the education system, told I wouldn't graduate high school, told I'd never make it through university, made it through each one with honors, had to push through that. And I start here because it's so important in business for us to understand the power of being underestimated. You're not put in rooms with people who know your value, and our job is not to expect them to do so. They've been taught a narrative and a story, and they're projecting that on you because it keeps them safe. And so when I take that to my business experience, I had to literally, again, go back to this idea of reprogramming. I had to start finding people and artists and individuals that were at the level that I wanted to be, and I had to start operating from that lens and that level. And so I'll give you a quick example. L'Oreal Paris was my first big deal. People are like, how did you get that? What was the experience? Who came along? What agency was this through? This was through me going online and saying that Janelle Monáe is one of my favorite artists. Lizzo is one of my favorite artists, like currently in line with this generation. Beyonce is one of my favorite artists. Who are they working with? What do their websites look like? And what would they need to do in order to be recognized by a brand like L'Oreal? And so literally cold emailed them, sent them my package. I said, yes, I'm a singer-songwriter, but I also have a humanitarian award because I really believe in wellness and mindfulness. And the response was that we've gotten lots of submissions and we love what you're doing, and we would love for you to write a song for our campaign and also to be the face of the Women of Influence Awards. And I got to open for the cast of How to Get Away with Murder. And the reason that I'm explaining this is because there was no one to hold my hand. I didn't have anyone to say, oh, this is how you should do it. And I didn't have anyone to tell me that I was worthy of doing that. And I didn't feel comfortable while I was doing it. I was terrified. I was asking myself why and who. But I knew underneath that we're not supposed to feel comfortable when we're going after things. So a part of the answer to this is, the first thing is, again, we need to sit in the power of being underestimated. There's so much power in people not seeing you, because if I had a bigger agency, I might have lost that because they might have asked for too much or they might have done it differently. But the humility of the fact that I was like, I'm a new artist, I put out the mission statement of L'Oreal. I took time to write out how it aligns with mine. I sent an email that didn't have a traditional format, and that's what was recognized. Now, taking it over to the general conversation of how do we just like apply this to like who we are as artists, it goes back to this conversation about our value. Your value is not necessarily something that you're going to have. It's not necessarily something that you're going to understand, but it's something that you can create for yourself, not by being comfortable, but by starting to study the people that are around you that are in a space where they are operating where you want to be. And so by operating at the future version of yourself, you're teaching your younger child, you're teaching your subconscious that there's another layer to who you are, and it'll slowly start to work toward that. And then the second thing that I would say is in regard to business, I remember Youth Employment Services was one of the resources that I had when I was really young, and they allowed me to go through a business program with them. It was like 6 months for entrepreneurship. I went into that program and said, I just want to fund a single. And they were like, no. You're a singer-songwriter. You went to school for international development. You love community. And you also are a weird theater kid who has another major in theater design and performance. These are all weird things that no one understands, but these are also things that are going to make you money. So the last part of this is it's so important to have people around you that see something in you that you don't see in yourself, that are going to push you to be your best version and are going to tell you that it's not just about where you are right here, it's about thinking about other things. How do you get those people? You literally can cold email them, because people want to help, people want to know who you are, and they want to support you. And so find people that are doing incredible things and learn from them and allow them to also inform the things that and the bigger versions that you can be, because they'll just teach you so much about yourself that you don't fully know.
That is super, super powerful. And it reminds me of something that I heard recently, which resonated, which was, we get what we negotiate. We don't get what we deserve.
Deborah Cox. This was from your podcast.
She said that. I was like, where was this floating around?
Yeah.
But it's so nestled in my brain. But what you're saying, that's really the truth. And that's why I think at the bottom of all of this is really going deep down and feeling your belief in yourself and developing your self-worth muscle, because it is such a muscle, and we have to work really hard to believe that we're worthy of so many different things. And I think everything that you're saying are such tangible tools to overcoming that and to really just negotiating what you really do deserve. And I think that's like so cool.
And I'm going to fangirl it back. So one of the lessons too that I learned from you and Rhiannon Conscious Economics, when I was working on the summit this year, we had really limited time, and I asked for help because I didn't really know how to before. And they said, hey, we're just going to connect you with one of the sponsors that we know. And I'm learning that you can be in spaces with powerful women and it's not competition. We're all supporting each other. And the same with the SEAL. It's like, it's an abundance mindset. Once you switch that and you realize that you're around people, you're in similar industries, you're doing similar things, but people actually want to support you. That's been a switch for me in being able to share space with people and offer and support and give as much as receive. So I also just want to say thank you, because I've learned so much from all that you're doing. And
thank you. I think it's totally the replacing the competition with collaboration, and that's just something you have to do. So,
and mentorship is so important
absolutely.
in the music space. It's like, it's one of the things that I would want to impart on every emerging artist and everyone who's young that's here or is listening. It's like everyone that is further along than you wants to help you. It's like one of the best things about, reaching like another plateau of success in your career, which you guys will know, is being able to like help and like fast track that process. Obviously, as you were saying, and I love that you got into the fact that that the discomfort when you're coming up in this industry, and when you're coming up in any industry, when you're working hard and you're working on yourself, of course it's uncomfortable. And when we're young, we think that like it looks easy for everybody else, but that mentorship is so important. And I love the advice that you gave, Dom. You're so wise. I know that we don't have a lot of time left. I wanted to ask another question to Aseel and one to Lucas, but just to piggyback off of this conversation, Lucas, like we're talking about, our society revolves around money, and this is like a kind of conversation where we want to talk about the opposite of that. But as artists and musicians, no matter how successful we are, we're on the fringe, and that's kind of like what we're getting at with this is like knowing our worth. And no, we're not on the fringe. We are part of this world, and like we have to just reframe our relationship to money and reframe our relationship to all of this really important stuff. When was there a moment where you wanted to like reframe your relationship with money? Like what came up, and how did that feel, and like where did you go with that?
It's actually been very, very recent for me, and everything that you just said, like I just been having like these like oof moments where I'm feeling very, very emotional about all of this, because I went through a very long period of time as a transgender person in an industry that had no one around me that was like me. There was no room for me to walk into and be like, oh, there's this person who's been through it. How did they do it? And like what was happening was people were coming to me, and I was like, I'm just growing up while all of this is happening. And then the trans movement was happening, and now it's like the more we go forward, the more we go backwards. So for me, this self-worth piece has been like a yo-yo. I'm always going back and forth and back and forth. And I realized literally, I think at the beginning of this year, after being diagnosed 2 years ago with schizoaffective disorder and having lived a life where I always felt that I was mentally ill because I was trans, and then having a mental illness, and then coming out of that, discovering Buddhism, and then realizing one day just very, very clearly, I am a human being, I have value, and everything around me is going to react to how I react to myself. And it's only been since I've done that in a really spiritual kind of way. It's all based around mindfulness. In every single moment, I negotiate my worth. That's what is going to get me that energy being reciprocated towards myself. So my energy around money changed probably about 3 months ago. And this is all the stuff that I need to hear to just be like, keep going, keep going, keep going. And I want other folks who come from marginalized communities to believe that they can, because there are so many rooms where so many marginalized people walk in and all they find is, cisgendered white dudes. And it's getting boring when those folks are not educating themselves and realizing that everything that's been created in the world of arts is typically rising from marginalized communities that other people are appropriating and taking the money from and not giving it and spreading it where it's supposed to be. Anyway, long story short, it's really recent, and it all comes down to personal value and how I look at myself. I refuse to look at myself through the lens that society looks at me through. For example, what's happening in the United States right now, where literally, if none of you know, trans people are going underground. It's 2023, and these folks are so scared in the United States and many other places in the country, all over the world. And that fear is keeping us from coming forward. So it takes a lot of courage to have to do that kind of thing. So right now, it's authenticity, value, courage, and doing things that make me so incredibly uncomfortable.
Thank you so much for that answer. And
thank you, Unison, for sponsoring.
And Conscious Economics for presenting the panel. And
thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, that was such a good conversation, and I'm so grateful for you all tuning in. Again, if you want to check out more about the incredible artists that were on that panel, as well as Unison Fund, or any more work about financial therapy and Aseel, we'll try to link everything in the show notes below. And it's so nice to pop in with this bonus episode, and so excited about the beautiful community that keeps growing, whether it's through the listeners tuning in, but also the incredible folks that we get to co-create with, including the amazing folks at Unison Fund. Thank you so much for this partnership and coming together. It's so amazing to see so many new economy, radical, progressive folks coming together to do this work and really seed that conscious economy here in Canada and all around the world. So I hope you have an amazing rest of your summer, and we will see you back this fall with season 4 of the Conscious Economics podcast. Bye for now.